This movie is the definition of a guilty pleasure for me. On the one hand, it's an absolutely terrible adaptation of the best cases from the game it's based on, and sometimes it meanders and has boring scenes, and a lot of the characters just aren't quite right. But when it does actually get things right, it is a lot of fun to watch, as long as you remember to check your brain out at the door for the extremely long runtime. Ace Attorney is a 2012 adaptation of the first Phoenix Wright game, with the film adapting, for the most part, all 4 of the main cases, but only really focusing on fan favorites 2 and 4. What really gets to me is the fact that they felt the need to change so much stuff, which ruined the flow and a lot of the charm and intrigue those cases had. If you've played the game this is based on, you're also most likely going to be upset or at least questioning why they decided they needed to alter so much of how the plot progresses, especially since they cut both the first and third trials down to only their conclusions. But even then, they also even managed to mess up the flow of those. For example, Phoenix throughout the entire film is now portrayed as nothing more than an incompetent buffoon with occasional moments of being a savant, instead of a talented up-and-coming defense lawyer who, while yes silly, still managed to do his job. Instead of Larry giving his girlfriend the thinker clock as a one-of-a-kind gift, instead now he has both a curiosity shop replacing his hot dog stand, and he also sold it there, with Mia having to come in and save the trial before it ended. And that's just the start of the unneeded changes, but is far from being done there. Some of the changes I actually got a kick out of, like the Blue Badger already being the precinct's mascot, and the fact that someone unexpected is in the suit. The story for the most part was still easy to follow along, but this is definitely a bad place for new fans to start, and old fans will have to really give a lot of excuse for the poor changes. Despite that, and some of the drag in the courtroom scenes, the film is still a fun and surprisingly fast-paced mystery till the last 30 or so minutes. Also, the tone is just a bit weird for the film, since while it is verging on complete parody comedy, there are some genuinely creepy and sad and upsetting moments in the film that gave me tonal whiplash. The changes to the way the cases play out isn't just limited to the story itself, as characters themselves, for the most part, were changed for the worst if they weren't a pretty darn spot-on rendition of themselves. I mean, just look at what they did to the flamboyant Mr. White himself. They also have no reason at all to cut April May, but keep Lotta when they both function in a similar manner to the story in the game. Everyone else, for the most part, is fairly well handled. I felt that Phoenix was way too bumbling and incompetent, sadly, mostly just standing around and gawking until either someone pointed out what was needed, or he fell right onto the evidence. Maya, Larry, Dick, and Edgeworth were all fantastic, however, and outside of the terrible character change for Red White and Yanioki, along with Von Karma, everyone else looked and acted the part. The film actually looks and feels like the games, but I have no clue why they introduced holographic evidence and made the movie take place in an oddly dystopian Japan. I feel as though quick cuts from character reactions to evidence could have made the courtroom scenes feel exactly how they did in game, without odd and quirky background extras and CG to keep the audience's attention. The fan service was a lot of fun to see and hear, such as the fact that there were callbacks to the Steel Samurai and other major winks to fans, like the previous mentioned Blue Badger. I also loved the scene where they threw confetti onto Larry when he won the case to emulate the feeling of the games. That was just some really fun visual fan service. The scene with the digital confetti just isn't as charming, however. The film also used a fair bit of music from the game, but also had its own generic score thrown in as well. I really wanted more music from the game's OST, but there just wasn't enough, as the droning generic epic music was just bland. Characters all sounded how I imagined them to, which was really nice. Alright, since there are some spoilers I want to talk about, please jump to the timestamp provided if you don't want any spoilers. Anyone who hasn't played the game or doesn't want spoilers for the film for some reason gone? Good, on to the spoilers. For one, I was really off-put by the fact that we saw into the spirit world, and the fact that it was basically just hell. The visuals were neat, but it certainly did not fit Phoenix Wright, but I do guess that it fit the slightly more edgier and creepy tone the film was trying to achieve. I wasn't too big a fan of Maya's spirit transformation into Mia, as Mia just felt more like a force ghost standing there, and I wish they did something more along the lines of what they did in the game. I actually didn't mind the fact that it was Larry who had the metal detector in the end to pin Von Karma, but I hated the fact that with the changes to Red White, he had to die off of the plot, and I also hated the changes to Edgeworth's father, with him trying to tamper with the evidence. That was just a really dumb change. Oh, but I did love the fact that Mia was the one controlling the empty Blue Badger outfit near the end of the movie. It's extremely subtle, but it's also a genuinely funny sight gag that took me a minute to catch. With all that said, I actually don't hate the movie, but I can almost certainly see why anyone could. It changed the already cinematic and perfectly told story from the original game, and trimmed important scenes and changed characters who were done far better in the game. If you're a fan of the games, the film is a novelty and a fun popcorn film, but I do not recommend people wanting to get into the series give this a watch before playing the games, as it messes up the narrative from the first game. The 2-hour runtime sometimes gets bogged down by unneeded melodrama and padding, but when the film is fun and quick-paced, it's a joy to watch, with some fun acting and plenty of fan service. It's a lazy afternoon sort of movie, and one that sadly, unlike the game, doesn't require any thinking. As always, if you want to help support the channel, please consider sharing the video with a friend or checking out my Patreon linked in the description below. If you have any comments, questions, or recommendations, leave them down below as I read and reply to everything. Until next time, this is Thierry Williamson signing off until the next video. See ya, guys!